866. Now, what are you waiting for?
We are the heartbeat of the Caribbean, where the music never stops. New era, TT Radio, Nett Radio.
And that is what it's all about. More money, plenty money. Guess what? Any money that is good for me. People, we welcome you to every St. Conks. Of course, you're listening to the RTT Radio. We are the heartbeat of the Caribbean. And this is where we take you above and beyond. On a Monday, every St. Conks, Garth Thomas joins us in between here. And whenever Mr. Thomas is here with us, it is a great morning. So Thomas, a great Monday morning to you. Where's Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas, you're muted. All right. God, Thomas, if you're here and I see you are muted. Well, I don't want to believe Mr. Thomas have sat in the studio and then just disappeared on us. So people just give me a couple of minutes while I make sure I get him inside.
like Ross and Bobos, Bolivars, and Crucinos, like Ross and Guineas, pesetas, and rupees. Some everyone will call it pieces of bread. Some everyone will
All right, okay.
You know?
Yeah. Hold on. We're coming to you. Hold on. We're coming to you. All right, so people, it's time for Every Cent Counts right here on your ROTT radio. And Mr. Thomas has finally joined us. So yeah. Mr. Thomas, good morning to you.
And a great morning to you, Sir Charles. Am I loud and clear now?
Yeah. You're sounding pretty decent now.
Not too
How
sure
you
what
doing?
happened there. Not too sure what happened there with the technology. I came on early and then I was trying to get my guest in. And I think somewhere in between there I lost the feed. So I came in with a new feed. But no problem. A great morning to you, Sir Charles.
Well,
And
thank you so much.
You know what I always say? Why settle for good when great is available? And great is always available.
That is
So we're going to have a great show this morning in spite of a slightly delayed start. And I would like to hasten to welcome to our platform an old friend of mine. She might be like my making this reference here, but my dominant memory of our guest this morning is riding a bike down Gillingham Avenue in Belmont with her plaits and her Bishop Anstey hat cocked on her head on her way to school. At the time, I was going to Trinity College. So that is how far back we go. All right, so let me, on behalf of you, Sir Charles, and of all our listeners out there in Nett Radio Land, welcome to our platform this morning, Valerie Taylor. All right. Now, Valerie, apart from that little cameo that I gave you there, Valerie not only attended Bishop Anstey High School, but she subsequently became the principal of Bishop Anstey High School. And she was also a founding director of Bishop Anstey East and Trinity College East. So she has a lot of experience in education. Subsequent to that, she was involved with the CARICOM Secretariat, I believe. You can always correct me, Valerie, as well as participating in the National Trust. She is also involved in a number of NGOs, and she is going to tell us a little more about that. So, Valerie, welcome. All right.
My pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
Delighted to have you. We had a nice chat last week with a colleague of yours. I think you know Cecile George.
Yeah.
And I find my lighting here is not the best. Is that better? That's a better picture of me? Yeah, I think so. Vanity, I think. Yes. So Val has been she's an activist of I don't think she would object to me calling her an activist. All right. But she has done work with our National Trust from 2015 to 2018, advocating for preservation of our built, the little thing that I have, yes, refusing it. The technology challenged me this morning, Valerie.
It's built on natural heritage or built on natural heritage.
Right. Okay. So, Val, on this program, I am attempting to stir and provoke interest in moving our nation forward. We have just celebrated our 63rd anniversary as an independent nation, which as nations go, it means that we're still young. We're still fairly young as a nation. And I think we have made some progress, although between me and you, I think the progress is minimal. Of course, some people might take objection to that. My greater concern, apart from whatever progress we have made, is that we chart a course for progress, for significant progress into the future. All right? So I am talking about 2050. And I am wondering, what is Trinidad and Tobago going to look like in 2050? And what can we, as people who are here on the ground now, what can we do to move our nation forward to significant achievement by 2050? So I think that your interest in history and culture and heritage, all were very poignant words when it comes to nation building, suits you very admirably to make some comments on this area. So you worked with the Curriculum Secretariat and you are with the National Trust. And I see that you were organizing some tours and stuff to our built-up, what we call our built-up heritage. Tell me a little more about the National Trust and its mission and your participation.
Okay, well, I got involved in the National Trust several years ago when they were looking for someone to head it up. I was already retired and I took the position knowing that it was not going to be forever. So between 2015 and 2018 in particular, while Professor Winston Sweet was the chairman, we sort of brought the National Trust into front and center stage. It had gone through lots of iterations before that. And part of the problem was the legislation had not been fully proclaimed. There was not the kind of funding for professionals to work with the trust. But despite that, in the period we worked together with Professor Sweet, we did bring the trust up to the, I should say, the sites of the country. We did it by doing the things that were easiest to do, the things that would have cost the least money. One of which was organizing tours around the country, and in particular, tours to Nelson Island, taking school children to Nelson Island, which was a really very fascinating opportunity. When we started, we did it with PTSD and made an attempt to bring schools from all over Trinidad. So there were children from Toco, children from Mayaro, Port of Spain, Tobago, and Nelson Island offered a wonderful opportunity to present a capsule of Trinidad history, because we were able to talk about it as a place where the first peoples lived, going all through the colonial history to the French who were privateers and pirates and in the area. We looked at the coming of the Indians, because East Indian indentureship was basically focused on Nelson Island for many years. There was the very interesting part of the American, when the Americans were here in the 1940s, how they used Nelson Island. And it went right up to, of course, Butler. Butler was incarcerated on Nelson Island. And the detainees in 1970 were also there. So just on that one spot, we were able to bring students to an understanding of the breadth and the complexity and the fascination of Trinidad history. So that was one of the things that was done. And other things I'm no longer there as CEO, but a lot goes on still. They now have Millefleur as their headquarters, and there are various lectures and events to bring us aware of the history, because you're not going to preserve your built heritage if you don't know what it is about, if you don't understand what its significance is. So I think before you start to talk about loving your country, you have to start talking about knowing your country. And there's not a lot of the kind of knowledge that generates the love and the pride and the patriotism that we should be experiencing. So the National Trust continues, and it's open to membership. We did a phenomenal membership drive many years ago. I'm sure it continues. So people who want to know more can join the trust, and you don't need to join, but joining means that you pay a membership, very small membership fee, and that contributes to the organization doing more than it would without your fee. And it's always good to feel invested in something. So I hope people Google National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago and see how they can participate. You can tell your story there as well, not just listen to the stories of others.
Yeah. Well, I was chatting with Cecile last week. We have acknowledged, I think it is generally acknowledged, that the history we have of our nation is a history that was written by our conquerors / colonizers, and therefore it is a biased history at best. And
well, the thing is, God, there's a lot of history. There, we would divide history into, there's political history, there's economic history, there's social history. Of course, a lot of our political and constitutional history has to do with our relationship with Britain and that sort of thing. But there is an amazing amount of social history that is available that is not being used. And I want to highlight here the Calypso. We have calypsos that can tell you any story that you want to know about in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And it is a very accessible form of storytelling, but it is not, it does not have the kind of platform that allows us to be consistent. That's one of the problems. Yes, we do something for Calypso History Month from time to time, and every now and then somebody gets a VAPS and does some work. But we have enough information on our Calypso, and there are stories to be told. They are not just the stories of the individual Calypsonians and how they came to be who they are, but they're the stories of the rum and Coca-Cola comes to mind. That whole episode where we took on the Americans who had taken the song without proper authorization. It was a big case in America, rum and Coca-Cola. There are all sorts of stories. When there was the Calypso craze, there was a time that was called the Calypso craze in the US and in, generally UK as well. And the sale of Calypso records were higher than anything that sometimes, what we would think of rock and roll, etc. We've had our moments, but we just don't, we have not internalized them. It's always aha moment. And, that's very sad. At this point, there should be certain things that if you've lived in Trinidad or you've gone to school in Trinidad, that you know about Trinidad. And one of those things, not the only thing, but one of those things should be the story of the Calypso. And of course, some of the more outstanding Calypsos. You can't begin to know all, but there are some Calypsos that should definitely be part of our national inventory, that if you're a Trini and you hear it, you could start to sing it.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've always been curious about, Val, and I don't know if any studies, any research has been done in that area, is the names of our Calypsonians. How did they get those names? We have the Black Stallion, we have Shadow, we have Sparrow, and then and back in the day, it was Sparrow and Melody.
Yes.
There are so many Zandoli, Sugar Aloes. I am sure that there must be some very great stories surrounding how they came to those names. And I'm not aware that there's any scholarship in the area.
Well, Chalk Dust, bless his heart, is a walking encyclopedia. I think he's probably one of the last and the oldest practitioners that has a very good understanding of the history of the Calypso. And he, of course, they tell the story that in the past, of course, people took on names that were very associated with important people, and that's how we got the lords and the king this, king fighter, and lord this and lord that. But there was a tradition in the Calypso tent of the older Calypsonians naming the younger ones. And for example, I've heard them say, Sparrow was given the name Sparrow because of his movements, the quick bird-like movements. And some people got names that they liked, some people got names that they didn't like. But as you say, there are stories to be told about our Calypsonians, how they got their names and how they got involved in the Calypso. Because for an art form that has not been properly, as I say, Gordon Rowley has done a lot of work on the Calypso. Chalk has done work. There's a lot of written work on the Calypso, but it is not institutionalized. If you wanted to go today to a place where you can sit and request information on the Calypso, the best you could probably do is the library, and they probably would have to pull out some stops. It's not as if there is a space where, okay, I'm in Trinidad, the land of the Calypso. I can go here and I can hear about the history of the Calypso. I can hear different Calypsos. I can make the connection between the Calypso and Carnival, the connection between the Calypso and Steel Band, the Calypso and patriotism, because there are endless songs, Calypsos that speak to love of Trinidad and Tobago and that sort of thing. So that is one of our, and when it comes to culture and heritage, that is where we have dropped the ball. We have not we do not have the kinds of institutions that support and promote in a consistent way. You can't do it for one day. You can't do it for 1 month. It has to be something that of itself continues to grow. Because if we had a Calypso History Museum and curators of this museum, they would be doing the research. They would be coming upon all kinds of interesting aspects of the Calypso to promote and to put forward. So it is very, very important that we have the kinds of institutions that support our culture and our heritage, and part of the work that they will be doing will be promoting it, making sure that there is information that are accessible for schools at different levels. You can be learning about the Calypso from kindergarten. You can be learning Calypsos. You could be learning, so primary, secondary school. I've just taken on the Calypso here, but the aspects of our heritage and history are amazing. There's just so much that we have and that we can benefit from.
All our great mass makers going back to the day. I mean, as a little boy, I remember going down by Urtic Road out there. They used to have a stage just opposite where Republic Bank used to be. And there was a particular competition. It was like a Belmont competition. And I always remember the Roman mask. there was a thing about Roman masks in those days, that you see the guys decked out like a Roman soldier and so on like that. But do you think, you talk about institutionalizing this? How serious, in terms of, my broader context about moving our nation forward, how serious is this absence and under promotion of our culture, especially in the areas of Calypso, Steel Band, and Mass?
Well, I think to begin with, under promotion means under utilization. And as I said, there's a lot there that we can benefit from. We can benefit from it in various ways, including our development of our own sense of identity. Before independence, I think we had a better sense of who we are than we do today. Of course, a lot has to do with the fact that we are now open to the whole wide world, and anybody with a cell phone can intrude on us and distract us. So it's a very hard time for us to try to focus and reflect. But if we don't do it, we are missing out on what is an opportunity to understand ourselves much better than we currently do, and not to be distracted and to jump on every little issue as if it, the story about the sky falling down, the little stick that says, the sky is falling down. We have a sort of sky is falling down mentality that allows us to be concerned with things that are really not very, very important. What are the important things? I think living and working together. How do we live in this space? How do we work together? How do we make the best space and the best place with the best people? And a lot of that has to do with values and attitudes. And our culture can speak to us about important values. We can speak to the values of neighborliness, camaraderie, collaboration that is involved in a whole lot of our traditional life. Whether it is bringing out a mass band, I mean, there is nothing more community focused. Yes, there is a commercial aspect to it now, and there are mass bands that are operating probably on better organized platforms than some of our national ministries. But at the core of it, it is about people and community, and about people celebrating life and celebrating each other in a way that is so joyful and so contagious that despite all the naysayers and despite all the efforts to get rid of the carnival and its associates, they have just continued to prosper. There was a time when we thought there would be the end of the steel ban. Nobody was interested. And, you can't stop people now from going out to hear that. And yes, we could do with a lot more understanding of the story of the steel ban and appreciation of the people who put, blood, sweat, and tears and take plenty jail and all of that for it. We need to understand those stories. That will contribute to our understanding of our values and empower us as a people. So it's not just what we it is what we are going to miss if we do not use it, but it also has opportunities. And I saw Cecile talk about it. Yes, the content for film, the content for novels, the content for plays, the content for some kind of cultural event. A lot of it is tied up in the history and our traditional culture. And you can't write the story if you don't know the history. You can't write the play. So we need to put on a sound footing an understanding of ourselves. And yes, there are some negatives, but there are loads of positives. And we need to focus a little more on the positives and pull those out as we go towards what is really very uncharted waters in the next 10, 15 years, where a lot is going to be happening in places that are outside of Trinidad. And if we are not minding our business, and if we are not grounded and focused, we could be pulled all over the place as we sometimes are being now.
Yeah. You touched on what I consider to be a very important aspect of the thing there when you made a reference to quality of life. Now, I have this beef about the fact that capitalism, as the strongest economic force in the world, as far as I am concerned, has defined things in a manner that is reinforcing to their concept. What do I mean by that? There is standard of living and there's quality of life. And these things are not the same. And yet, in the capitalist environment, we grow up thinking at a subconscious level, we grow up with the impression, with the mindset that in order to have a high quality of life, you must have a high standard of living, which is so devastating as far as I am concerned. So when you talk about the relationships that are generated as a result of participation in our culture, I wonder to what extent those relationships can really contribute to a quality of life that is totally divorced or at least separated from the concept of that I need to have a big house and a big car and a big work and be able to fly to Miami to shop.
Right. Well, again, nature abhors a vacuum. And if you turn on your television or read your newspaper or whatever, just the presence of the commercialism of life, it is there. It pays. So you're asked to come and get a new car. You're told to come and get a new fridge. There is a lot of that in this space. And that overpowers the other things. So that a child growing up and looking around, they are getting those messages. They are getting the messages about the new phone and the new shoe, and because those are the dominant messages. And that is where, in our culture, if we do not, in our own space, promote the beauty of our mountains, the wonder of a drive on a Sunday morning up the North Coast, or a visit to this, if we don't put these things there for people to see as not only good, but satisfying, then they are not going to see them easily. Some people get the message, but it is really, really very difficult to shut out the messages that are saying to you, get a bigger car, get a bigger house, get more money, get. And everybody knows that, as you say, is how capitalism works. You got to get more. You got to get a new phone. And those are the things that are occupying people. And in a lot of cases, they are creating a lot of stress and a lot of unhappiness. How do we replace those messages with messages that are edifying and uplifting and joyous? And that's where art and culture comes in. That's where going to a play that speaks. I see there's something on at Napa, Moon on a Rainbow Shawl. Many Trinidadians have never seen Moon on a Rainbow Shawl. Their little bit of advertising is really not going to cut it in places where, you are bombarded with all sorts of other things that you ought to be looking at on Netflix or wherever. So the question of how do we live and what do we think is an important part of our living. Years ago, I lived in England for a little while. And while I was there, I told myself, when I get back to Trinidad, I am going to the beach every Sunday that comes along. And for a while, I did it. And I remember that feeling, being in this place that was not, there was a lot going on that was interesting. But I kept thinking, driving to the beach, enjoying what it has to offer, opportunities to just sit and talk and chat and relax. That was not part of living in London. It is part of living in Trinidad, and yet a lot of people don't do it. They just don't, they haven't been moved to try that. When I was at the National Trust, we did tours all over Trinidad. And 80% of the people who went on the tours said, one, they'd always heard about the place, but never been before.
Yeah.
And they always said, how come nobody told me this before? It was like I could put money. At the end of every tour, at least 4 people would say, how come I never knew about this? How come nobody taught me this in school? And those are the gaps we have to fill. People need to be exposed. And it takes money. That's the problem. It takes money. Somebody has to organize a maxi, somebody has to put things in place. If it's a national trust, if it's a tour operators, etc. But it also has to be promoted. Somebody has to say to you, one, I've been there and it is fantastic. Go see for yourself. Or tell you why the place is important, and you get sufficiently curious that you want to go and see for yourself. We do not know our country. We know the highway. We know about flying up and flying down. But there are parts of Trinidad, there are people who do it. There are people who are out there visiting waterfalls and climbing up in the back of God knows where and experiencing the peace and the beauty of Trinidad in a way that we need to be able to share with others. Make it easier. Make it earlier. Our school children should be going on several tours. You shouldn't leave primary school without having had certain experiences, And you find that is happening less and less because, as I said, it is not as institutionalized as it ought to be.
Yeah.
Something that happens there. Every year, there are new children in Standard 1. If you organize a tour for Standard 1 children or an experience for Standard 1 children, you will be doing it every year because every year there are new ones, and then there are opportunities to get the ones who missed it, and then they're the ones who want to go back. When we do these things, then we start to develop the kind of consciousness that helps us to understand who we are, put in place what are the important things in life generally, and in our lives in Trinidad. We are living in Trinidad and Tobago. We are not living in New York. We are not living in London. We are not living in Dubai. What does it take to experience Trinidad and Tobago in the best way possible that allows for the best for both ourselves as nationals and the country, the environment, the public space that we live in?
Since the likelihood, there's been a lot of talk about the restructuring of our education system. I think there has been talk ad nauseum about it. Similarly, to all the talk about public service reform.
Mm-hmm.
These are formidable challenges, and I don't think much progress has been made in either of those 2 areas that I've identified here. If we cannot depend upon those in control to really become aggressive relative to the inclusion of these kinds of elements as a basic part of our education, do you think that social media is a mechanism that we can engage to fill that gap?
That's a hard question because you know my age, and I know I am not I do not interact with social media in the way that younger people do. I still listen to the radio. I still read a newspaper, and I still think that in a small space like Trinidad, we need to have a platform. I suppose it comes from my childhood and yours, where we had a more homogeneous experience of Trinidad. If you lived in the north, you understood there was nothing that somebody in Belmont, Woodbrook, St. James didn't know and understand. We live the space. Now, you can be living in St. James and not having a clue about what is even going on in St. James. The other day, I was in St. James for the Hussein, and a woman walking up the road is asking me, "What is this?" She's walking through the Hussein and saying, "Tell me, please, what is going on here?" Now, you know, that was not part of our experience growing up because the public space was ventilated. It was on the one or two radio stations. And then when we got the TV station, the one TV station, it was on the newspapers. We were all on the same page. What social media allowed is for everybody to be somewhere different. There are some children in Trinidad who are not in Trinidad. They are physically here, but their heads are not in Trinidad. They do not feel Trinidad. They can sit on their phones or their tablets or whatever and experience a very different reality, a virtual reality. And I do not think that that is a helpful situation when we have work to do, when we have a nation to build. We cannot be building a nation with everybody somewhere else. And that is where schools become very important. Everybody goes to school in Trinidad. There is a curriculum. There is a curriculum mandated by the Ministry of Education, which says what children should learn, what they should know, and what they should be able to do in year 1, year 2, standard 1, standard 2, standard 3. Now, I don't know how recently we've looked at that curriculum and adjusted it in light of the onslaught, where we're saying, because long ago, you didn't have to, nobody had to teach me about the savannah. I lived in Belmont on a Sunday afternoon. I will walk out with my cousins and we walk around the savannah. Right. I had a sense of what the savannah was. Now there is a lot that children just don't know, whether it is because of fear, people are not allowing them to run wild and go all over the place like they used to. Therefore, how do we fill those gaps? How do we fill those gaps in school, in social studies, in history? How do we fill those gaps with our music and art education, our programs of extracurricular activities and what we call field trips? Are we saying, okay, this is what we want the average Trinidadian to know, to think, to feel by the time they're 7, and by the time they're 10, and by the time they're 15? Because if we don't say what we think is best, and of course, I'm not just saying me, or, it has to be a level of consensus, and there's a lot of research that helps people to make these kinds of decisions, that it does not become authoritarian or totalitarian or whatever. But if you don't do it, you are just leaving the space open for whatever comes in, whatever anybody gets into their head to post on social media, to create a film about, to do whatever, because it's there. The brain is built to learn. The eyes are there to observe. And if you don't curate, as people would say, what children are being exposed to, it's not that they're going to grow up without nothing in their heads. They are going to have in their heads the things that reach them. And that is where social media, becomes an issue. I've been hearing them on the American stations talking about social media in the most horrific ways. They want to stop it. It is causing any amount of chaos. But, you don't stop things like that. You don't stop them. You provide alternatives. You try to keep up with the other things that you want people to see and know. But any day you start saying, turn off the phone or take away the phone, you start, you open a can of worms, you open up a new problem on top of the old one. But we have to be serious about being Trinidad and Tobago and about who we are, where we are, And as you say, where we want to go, we want to go to a place where there is more efficiency in the management of our public spaces and institutions. Everybody knows that. You don't want to be on the road in traffic jam forever. You don't want to be going in and out of Ministry of Legal Affairs 50 times to get a form or change something. You don't want to see that grass growing all over. And it has nothing to do with CPEP because it was like that before. You don't want to see that grass growing over your head on the verge of the savannah and in the public spaces. You don't want to be sinking your foot in a hole on Frederick Street. You want efficiency in your public management. You want courtesy in your public and private spaces. And you want your children to grow in a balanced environment that allows them to become good people, good Trinidadians, good citizens, and to have opportunities to live useful, happy lives.
Yes.
You don't want to be living in a hovel. You don't want to be looking every day for $1. So there are ways that we could, it's only 1 million of us. There are ways that we could challenge the issues in a serious way to make the space a happier space for all of us.
All right. So in a very real sense, would you say that social media is the new mechanism for colonial domination? Is that,
Well,
I don't know if that was the intent. I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
that there was a sinister
yeah.
plot to do that, but the technology has evolved and it has, thrown up all of these little mechanisms that are very attractive, especially to our younger people. And the influence of these things is unquestioned, as you quite beautifully articulated there. How are we going to fight against that massive and ubiquitous influence that is there?
The thing is, what I have learned in life is that there's nothing that is all good and there's nothing that is all bad. And that as we mature and we get wiser, we learn to see that. And I'm sure I was involved in the establishment of Bishwansi High School East and Trinity College East 24 years ago. 24 years ago, the school had more computers than any other educational institution. And they promised, they hoped that technology brought to education at that point was amazing. You looked at it and you say, oh my God, this is going to fix all the issues. You get access to educational information that before you had to rely on textbooks for. You got live, you could go through the Louvre in Paris and see. When you thought about all the things that the technology could do, it was mind-bending. 24 years later, the number of Trinidadian schools, or I should say Trinidadian students, who have had the benefit of that educational technology remains very, very small. Instead, we have people who have been now consumers of media. All they do is look at things. They are looking and they are drinking in things. Long ago, at that time, I remember reading about children in Singapore, and at 24 years ago, who were writing code at age 7, who were creating the technology and taking the technology to new levels. I don't know that we've done a lot of it here. Yes, there are some schools and there's some clubs and they're doing some robotics and they're doing some engineering tinkering. But to look at the technology and say, what can I do with this technology that is going to be for the greater good? And, what could I do? There are people who have used the technology for assistive learning, so the blind and the deaf and the challenged could know and experience more. The technology is now diagnosing all kinds of illnesses, etc. There's a lot that the technology is doing. If you choose to use your phone to look at pornography, to look at stupidity and bacchanal, that says to me that there has been a deficiency in the way you have been exposed to the world. That you don't see that that phone can find you information that is important to your living and your life, as opposed to just being a mindless consumer of somebody else's bacchanal. So one of the things is, how do we educate our children? How do we educate them to be, it's a cliched word now, critical thinkers? How do you look at the world and assess what is useful, what is less useful, what is good, what is positively dangerous and damaging? Because unless the individual makes that decision for themselves, people going about the place trying to tell them that is just wasting their time. And how do you do it? You do it through an enlightened education system. And when I say education system, I am talking about the schools as the first place, because there's legal, there are laws that say all children in Trinidad need to be in schools between the age of 5 and I think 17 or something. That's a law. So we know where those children are going to be, and we know what we can do. But in every other civilization, in every other civil area, what is done in the schools is supported outside, whether it is through museums, art galleries, plays, concert halls, etc. So our public life has to mirror what we want for ourselves. And our public life really isn't doing that very well right now. Carnival is holding up. Carnival is holding up. It's not as there are a lot of aspects of it that can do with better management and better understanding. But Carnival is holding up. But art in schools, music in schools, public spaces. I belong to an organization, Dada and Projects, where our concern is the aesthetic of the public space. You cannot want people to operate in dilapidation, degradation, and slumhood and expect the highest level of thinking from them. So we have to have a commitment to a public space that enhances the human spirit and brings out the best in our intelligence. So it's complex, Garth. It's really very complex, but it has to be approached in an orderly way. And I do believe that Trinidadians and Tobagonians have some of the best brains that we can ever want anywhere in the world. We have a legacy of thinkers, but our public space is not supporting a lot of our private our private hopes and dreams.
Wow. The matter is so provocative and so needing, airing. And I trust that a lot of our listeners have been in some way stimulated and given some new angles to look at old problems. But we are fast approaching the 12th hour, and I know Sir Charles must be getting nervous because we have to get some news in. And I don't know if, Sir Charles, is it possible to get one person, one call in, or is it too late? Hello, Sir Charles.
No, I'm here with you. Yeah, we cutting it close. Right? Cutting it very, very close. But yeah, if somebody if you're out there and would like to add or ask a question, you can do so very quickly. You have like about 3 minutes or less. So go ahead now. If I get the call, I'll let you know. If not, we wrap at 12.
It looked like less. But Valerie, I want to thank you for being here and for informing our public relative to critical elements that are requisite if we are going to move this nation forward.
Well, I think I
Wednesday we
did.
celebrate.
God, let me interrupt you. I think I have that caller there. Caller, good
great.
morning.
Yes, good morning. Good morning to the
Good
guests
morning.
and God switch out everybody. But it is really, as you say, too close to call because it's time for the news, and what I have to say will take half an hour. So
Yeah,
I won't start.
no
Right?
problem.
But it was so interesting. I wish I could give you money, pay for the station to go on for 2 hours, one for the listeners and one for the people who are the guests and so on. To
Well,
explain.
don't worry.
Thanks a lot.
You can do that.
I will try very hard to do it.
No problem, is it? We'll talk.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Thanks for the comment. It's good to know that the stuff we talk about is not just of interest to us, because it is certainly stuff that our wider public need to be sensitized to. And there are so many gems coming out of Valerie's presentation this morning. I know she did some work on Belmont. I know my guest last week, Cecile, had done some work on the history of Woodbrook. And I'm not too sure whether these things are getting the kind of a play and exposure that we need, that we, the nation, needs. So we will keep trying to see what we can do. And Valerie, I'm quite likely I will invite you back on the program at some time. But thanks again for very, very insightful and direct messages to our audience, because education is not the government work. Education is our job. Every parent has to understand that they have a critical input in making these things happen. So thanks again, Valerie. And
You're welcome.
next week.
Okay.
We'll see what we have next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Okay, Valerie. Okay, Sir Charles.
Yeah, no problem. You tell people to get in contact with you before you go.
Yes, 680-3185. That's my WhatsApp contact. 680-3185. And this show has been recorded. So anybody who would like to get a recording, WhatsApp me at 680-3185, and I will forward the recording to you. So, Charles.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much, God. And of course, thank you very much for your guests. People, this has been Every Cent Counts right here on the Era TT Radio. And we have our 12 o'clock news that is straight ahead.
The news you need, the clarity you deserve. Local, regional, global. This is Net Radio News Now.
This is News Now on New